Your route choice can make or break the success of a Mythic Plus run. In this video, I'm going to show the fastest routes currently being used across all 8 Midnight Season 1 dungeons. With the season coming to an end, many players are looking to lock in their final Mythic Plus goals, particularly the 1% and 0.1% titles. We're going to break down the most common routes used at the highest levels of Mythic Plus, looking at each one in detail and showing how you can implement them in your own keys. Before we start, a quick disclaimer. These routes will mostly assume a comp of Guardian Druid, Mistweaver Monk, Unholy DK, Org Evoker, and Demon Hunter. Replacing certain classes may require route adjustments, but I will highlight the class-specific utility used in particular pools, allowing you to then make changes based on your own comp where needed. We'll start with Maisara Caverns. Links to all the routes will be provided in the description and the pinned comment. This dungeon probably has the most diversity in route choice, so I think it's a good place for us to start. On the first pull, the tank needs to grab the first pack and then run down around to the left, looping back around and finishing on top of the Soul Eater. The gather here needs to be pretty quick, but the tank should still get threat on most of the mobs, so it isn't just a full W key sprint. A DK is also needed to kick this Hexer in on the far corner. Without a DK, this pack should be excluded from the first pull. For pull 2, the party should jump up and over this ledge, grouping the bears and the caster before pulling the extra laborers on top of the target dummy. Once everything is established, the tank should then run up the right side of the stairs into the hut, grab the mobs that are needed in there, and then come back down and finish on top of the mammoth. This is an extremely difficult tank pull, so a lot of care is needed here. Pull 3 is pretty standard. You either grip or range kick the far caster in. After this pull, this berserker here should be caged or otherwise in-capped to skip past it. You can also wait for it to patrol out of the way if you can't do this. The next pull is only really doable with a Guardian Druid. Without a Druid, you can instead do this Hex Guardian pull just before the boss. With a bear, the entire party will skip through this section and then jump down into the boss arena. The Druid will then stealth up around to this point, wait for the pack to patrol to about here, root it in place, and then pull the bears and the masks on top of the Shadowbinders. The tank then waits briefly for the mobs to catch up, roars once the shrink cast starts, and then jumps down and lets all of the mobs snap down. Nobody should touch anything here until they stop evading, otherwise they'll probably pull aggro. From there, you just pull the boss. Every DPS should also mark one of the Shadowbinder kicks. Next is the Lust pull. You pull the 4 front packs, using a Purge to pull the first one to stop the damage going out. Run right, and then down through the middle, bringing everything back onto the mini-boss. This pull does have 4 casters, which should die during cooldowns with Lust, but if you don't have an Augmentation Evoker, you probably want to just do 2 casters at a time and then chain the other ones in once some are dead. The section up until the third boss is pretty straightforward. The main thing of note is to grab bats from the sky where you can, and if you can't kick them, avoid standing in line with the tank. You should also be looking to chain pretty aggressively through this section. Similar to the Lust pull as well, the 4 caster pack down the bottom can be split by leaving 2 of the casters out and then chaining them when some of them are dead. Going into the boss, it's a good idea to kill these reanimated warriors pretty quickly, as they will obliterate the tank. If you have an Org Evoker, leaving 1 alive though can be really good just for damage, but otherwise killing them as soon as possible is probably the best approach. Then up to the final boss, you can natty skip through the middle here, but it's pretty tight. A Ring of Peace, Mind Soothe, or something like Mass Invis or Shroud can be useful just to make sure that nobody accidentally pulls one of these packs. Magisters Terrace actually has some really cool skips that can speed up the run pretty significantly, although they are pretty finicky, so I'll have to explain them in a bit of detail. The first 3 pulls are pretty standard. You want to Lust the first pull and then make sure you're jumping down and grabbing the Pyromancer from across this circle area here and pulling it into the alcove. The next skip relies on having an Evoker. The tank should be given a Wurnstone and then root this patrol when it is out of the way of the door. The tank will then run through, grab the Sentinel and pull it off to the right. The rest of the party should then follow behind, run to the left, after which the tank will use Wurnstone and meld. On the boss, the Pyromancer pack is pulled on top of the boss immediately. The second Worm pack should only be pulled after the first tank slam following the first intermission. Players should be careful around the door here, as sometimes the Sentinel can pull through the door if something like a DK pet bugs out and spawns behind it. For the following pull, start by killing the left worms a little bit to about 50% health, and then pull the other side. This will make sure that they don't all explode at once. One of the healers in the backpack here should also be in-capped. The following pull, you can take the caster outside using grip or a range kick, and then take it into the next pull, in-capping the caster in the far pack so that you've only got one at a time. Going into the last pull, you can in-cap one or two of the enforcers in this pack and save them for the boss. These will break pretty often. It's not the end of the world if they do, but it's definitely beneficial if you can take them onto the boss. The pull after the boss is pretty standard. You want to tank it outside and rotate kicks on the two casters as best you can. You also want to look to press defensives on the way down the hallway because the shredder charges can actually hurt quite a lot. The next skip is another evoker skip. Wurnstone the tank or a mobile spec like a monk or a demon hunter. The party should start on the left-hand side of the pathway here, while the person doing the skip will take the mob and pull it back and to the right. The important thing here is that this skip is extremely fast. The player should basically pull the mob, use maybe one global to get some extra distance, and then immediately Wurnstone and meld. You can technically do this without an evoker, but similar to the Sentinel skip, it is really finicky and really difficult. The next pull will start on the two Terrors, wait for the kicks to be interrupted, and then run through the center of the area. Once the Void Caller is dead, you can grab the first caster pack and then take it onto the boss once the Tyrant dies. Important thing to note here, if you mess up the skip previously, you cannot do this pull because the party will have to spend too many defensive resources on the Void Caller that you were trying to skip before. On the boss, one of the casters in the corner on this other pack needs to be in-capped while the other one is kicked alongside the boss. You only want one caster alive at a time. You should also start by tanking the boss in this corner so that the mobs will stay clustered for as long as possible. The pull after this boss is really cool, but it will murder your frame rate. Pull the bottom Terrors, use your kicks before running up, and then hug the wall on the left as you go upstairs. There are then 4 Terror kicks in this pull total, so every player in the party needs to mark one. The final pull before the boss is pretty standard. Just make sure that when you're going up and tagging this left pack that everybody gets in combat with it, otherwise the shredders might just jump to a single player and kill them instantly. For the final skip, there's a few ways to approach it. Warlocks can use their gate, druids can wild charge to someone, rogues can shadow step to someone, demon hunters can dash across. There's a lot of ways to do it. The important thing is that before the run, you need to work out how classes that can't get across are going to get over, using things like rescue or priest groups or anything like that. If there's, say, one person who still can't get through, it is usually worth it to simply have them die and then get a res on the other side. NPX has some spicy pulls, but unlike the other two dungeons, it is much less reliant on skips. We are probably all pretty familiar with this first pull by now. Having an engineer here is very useful for disabling the first beam, but without one, you just need to hug the edge as you go around. Make sure you kick the bolts, stop the channels, and kite everything in the direction that you're going. Going into the trash before the first boss, you want to in-cap 1 or 2 of the first pack. You want to prioritize the caster here, and if you have a second in-cap available, you want to then use that on the defender. These mobs are then saved for funnel on the first boss. This isn't really a route thing, but I do see it messed up constantly on the first boss. Do not break the lines immediately on the third charge of each set. Wait for the boss to start channeling first, and this will prevent you from getting stuck in corners with additional spawns. Pull 5 and 6 look really scary, but honestly, there's not actually a huge amount to them. Just watch your feet when the lines come out, press a defensive or meld when you're targeted by the large heal absorb, and focus down the tank buster mob. In the first pull of the gauntlet, you want to focus down the 2 casters rather than the large mobs. The next set of enemies is tied to the casters being alive rather than the lingering image, so kill them as quickly as possible to force the next round to spawn. For the following pulls, as the scroungers are being tagged in, be very careful with threat. They will often just immediately teleport behind players as soon as they're pulled, so the tank can sometimes not get any single global off on them. After the second boss, the tank should pull one lingering image, wait for the tank buster, and then pull the second one. This will desync their abilities and make the pull significantly easier to manage. The only real skip in this run is the lingering image on the bridge. Although this does require an Org Evoker as well, the tank will take Wurnstone, pull the lingering image backwards and to the right, while the rest of the party will run through to the left. The tank then uses the stone and melds to reset it. Make sure that there are no hots on the tank at the time. This is a pretty lenient skip as well, but if you can't do it, it is also completely fine. Just take the lingering image onto the next set of casters instead, and then you can remove either the engineer or the extra mob on the first pull. In the final section, the main thing to remember is that you only want one caster active at any given time, and you never want the caster alive during the final boss's phase. You may need to swap to it and single target it down if it looks like it's going to live. The only exception to this rule is the double casters off in the corner. These should be pulled when the boss is about 30%, and with Lust, they will die extremely fast in cooldown, so you don't have to worry about incapacitating one. Now, Windrunner Spire has some absolutely mental skips. These are quite difficult, but they are insanely cool and they have a huge amount of time saved to them. For the most part, you will need an Augmentation Evoker again for a lot of these, although I have seen some groups pull off similar skips with some cooks on other specs. The first pull is pretty standard. Coming down into the next section, you want to wait for the caster to patrol over to the left, then slowly pull in the 4 groundskeepers and take them into the next pull. This basically means that you will only have one caster in the pack as well. You can also use Mass Invis or Shroud here, this does help a lot, or you can in-cap the caster when it's in a good spot, although you can also just natty skip it as well. The Lynx pull is pretty nasty. You want to use big personals whenever you're targeted by the leap. It is also really important that everything in this pull dies before you move on, as anything left alive can cause things like DK diseases to spread, which will mess up the skip. For the next skip, your Demon Hunter or another Night Elf DPS needs the Wurnstone. The tank will slowly gather all of the Lashlings and Groundskeepers, while the DPS literally do nothing, and the healer puts no hots on anyone. Monks can spin, but otherwise, hands off keyboard. Take everything into this corner, while the Wurnstone player then pulls the Lasher backwards. The rest of the group will run through the packs here, and then here, while the other player ports back with stone and melds. The 2 Hawks then need to be in-capped. Ideally, you will sleepwalk the right one and you will cage the left one. Wait for the sleepwalked Hawk to move slightly out of the way and then pull everything onto the boss. Mechanically, this is a very difficult pull, but it saves multiple minutes compared to doing the area normally. After the boss, clear the entire room of the small trash to make room for the next skip. The rest of the party should stand in this corner while the Demon Hunter pulls and kicks the Woebringer, dragging it up the stairs as everyone else runs through the door. They can then Wurnstone and meld to reset it. After this, the Evoker should swap the Wurnstone back to the tank, as it is needed for the 3rd skip of the run. The next pull is also the Lust pull. For the final skip, this is probably the tightest one. First, someone needs to in-cap the Cutthroat before the pull. Alternatively, a Druid can also immediately push it with Typhoon and then use in-cap Raw. The way this skip works is that the tank will need to pull the Woebringer, the right mobs, and then quickly run to the top of this room before Wurnstoning and melding. This has to be done extremely quickly. If the Woebringer starts to channel, then it's too slow and everybody will die. But it does save heaps of time as well. The remainder of the dungeon is actually pretty normal. After the second boss, make sure you jump over the table and hug the left side, or you can use a Ring of Peace to push these mobs away. Before entering the final area, a monk can also use Ring of Peace to separate the axe thrower from the 2 grunts. Alternatively, an evoker can also sleepwalk the far grunt away from the axe thrower. Of all of the dungeons, Seat is probably the one where route choice makes the biggest difference. There are actually plenty of plus 24 seats that are being timed with close to like 3 minutes remaining, so a huge part of the dungeon is simply whether you can actually survive or not. The first pull with the 3 subjugators takes a little coordination in terms of how the chains are immune. Just make sure that you're not overlapping things like Tiger's Lust and Meld on the same one. Otherwise, the main thing is simply just killing one as fast as possible. The extra champions should be pulled by someone other than the tank onto the boss immediately. They are coded a little weirdly, so they will only charge the tank if they are the one that pulls them. On the second Rift Warden, this pack should be chained. Once the Void Caller minion is dead, you can grab the War Adept, and then once the Rift Warden is dead, you can grab the Subjugator. The following pull is with Lust. The Subjugator is the main priority target, followed by the Rift Warden, and then the War Adept last. After the boss, you should be pretty careful pulling this Destroyer across the river. Ideally, you would want to wait for the kicks to come out, let the slams go off, and then bait the frontal backwards before you book it across to the next pack. The final area is much the same as usual. Everyone should mark a kick on this final pull before the boss because there is 4 kicks and every person needs to manage one. The cool thing about this route is that there's no really fancy tech involved. It is just insanely fast because it's essentially pulling the maximum number of mobs possible without the route becoming completely suicidal. Skyreach is a funny dungeon because while it is pretty W key, there are some really interesting and like niche pieces of tech that you can do to actually speed it up quite a lot. On the first pull, you want to run all the way until the end, pulling the second Raven in once the Blade Talon has cast its Blade Rush. This will ensure that the AoEs are desynced rather than going off at the same time. Going up onto the next platform, have one player stun the Chakram Master and prevent it from overlapping with the other. After the boss, you can do some really weird things. You want your Evoker to sleepwalk one of the casters on the left side and then leave it controlled until the boss door opens. The important thing here is for tanks to then kite pretty regularly as the stacking debuff will ramp up pretty quickly with this many mobs. There is some weird tech that you can do at the moment where if a player with Meld taunts the caster and then immediately melds, then the constructs actually won't activate, but this feels pretty illegal and is probably going to get patched. So pulling it as per normal, you can pull, but it's basically a chain. You want to start with the first construct, and then once everyone's DPS cooldowns start to come back, which will be like 20 seconds into the pull, you want to bring in the remaining 2. This will also desync a couple of the beams. It is a good idea to cage a priestess as well and save it for the boss, particularly if you have an Org Evoker to farm additional resources off it. After the third boss is probably the biggest time-saving skip of the dungeon. Give a Wyrmstone to the fastest Night Elf DPS in the group. Normally it's going to be your Demon Hunter. The entire party will then stack in this corner while the Demon Hunter pulls down the stairs. You want to then run in, quickly grab the pack on the right, ideally have your DK grip the caster closer, and then once the group is safely through, the Demon Hunter uses a Wyrmstone and melds to reset the Blade Talon. Afterwards, swap your stone back to the DK or to another player who cannot naturally escape the final boss grab. The rest of the dungeon is pretty normal. It is also worth CCing one of these mobs here and saving them for additional funnel on the boss. This pull should be gathered relatively slowly as well, bringing in the Blade Talon after the construct finishes its first channel. Now, the hardest thing with Algethar is that there's not really much route variation compared to what the other options are. Even minor adjustments will basically guarantee an additional pull. That is probably fine for 1% keys, but if anyone is looking to push the 0.1% title, you will likely need to follow this route pretty much exactly. The first area up until Kroth is pretty standard. The one small piece of tech is that in the first pull, you want to CC the flyers near the entrance, or alternatively pull everything towards the front of the room and let the other patrols stay off to the side. You essentially just want to save one pack of flyers for the boss for additional funnel. This will also help your tank not get completely destroyed by the skitterflies. After Croth, the tank should then tag the worms and the small mobs before sprinting down the bridge. Everyone else then needs to stack underneath the large worm to make sure that it baits the charge onto the tank. For each of the pulls going forward, Night Elf players should periodically stand away from the rest of the group to bait the charge and then meld as soon as they're fixated. DKs can also use AMS and Horse to achieve the same sort of effect. In the Veximus area, everybody should mark a Surge Kick while the tank quickly gathers all of the packs. The cast should be synced with an AoE stun, most commonly an Evoker's Breath of Aeons. The first round of book cast should be allowed to go off, after which the tank can use an AoE stop as the casts will never aim at the tank. From there, it is basically just a rotation of CCs. The reason you want the first round to go off is because the books won't immediately recast. The tank may also need to kite around the room like a headless chook towards the end of this pull, because standing in melee range of multiple battle axes will kill them in about half a second. The pull after Veximus is almost identical to the one after Croth. The tank grabs everything and then legs it down the middle. Everyone stacks underneath to bait the charge, and then Night Elf players can periodically step out and use meld to take pressure off the tank wherever they can. The final lust pull is done after skipping up the hill. This is most commonly achieved with an evoker using rescue onto a 3-seater mount, although things like a warlock gate can also work. The Echo Knights also don't have true sight, so stealth works as well. And worst case scenario, your Demon Hunter can also misery skip the 2 casters. Once you're up there, the group should stack fairly tightly and only make large movements after all of the 4 swirlies have dropped. The first set will disappear when the next ones spawn, so you essentially just want to move back and forth on this small grassy area. Finally, you want to CC one of these casters and pull the other one onto the boss, making sure that you only have one active at a time. This becomes a little bit sketchy without a DK to grip it from the doorway, so once the second caster comes in, make sure that someone is there and able to ranged kick it in. Otherwise, it will basically just sit in Narnia and spam cast. You can also LOS behind the pillars if you need. Now, a fast pit pretty much has 2 simple objectives. You want to clear the area before the first boss in as fewer pulls as possible, and you want to chain aggressively throughout the dungeon. The first pull looks pretty scary with a Lich and 2 Graveblades, but it is surprisingly manageable for the tank with Lust going. You will want a non-tank player to pull the extra ghouls midway through the pull. On pull 2, the Plague Horror can be tagged in about halfway through, as they can then be chained directly into the next pack. Most of the damage in this pull should be focused on the Gargoyle. Pull 3 is pretty standard, and so is pull 4. DPS should try to line their cooldowns up with the second combat pot and funnel as much damage into the Lich on pull 4 as they can. On the pull before the boss, the tank needs to be careful not to move too quickly up this right side here. Doing so can cause the mobs that they pulled at the start to then pass through the extra caster, which you do want to save for the boss. Going into the boss, you want to CC the Death Whisper and try to keep it controlled like that for as long as possible throughout the fight. This will keep all of the 1 health mobs alive for additional funnel throughout the fight. Pull 7 after the boss is chained. Start with the Lich and the Dragon, and then bring the remaining mobs in once the Lich is dead. A ranged DPS or the healer should also tag the Gargoyle in once it is patrolling in a good position. The skip past the double Graveblade pack after the boss is easiest with an Evoker. Give a Night Elf DPS or the tank a Wernstone and have the rest of the party sit on this little left ledge here. The Wernstone player then pulls, kicks the caster and runs down the hill, and then melds before using a stone to return to the group at the top. The final section is mostly about chaining. Once the Lich and the caster die, you can grab the next caster up the hill, and then once everyone has cooldowns available and the leaping mobs are at about 50% health, you can bring in the mini-boss. Once the mini-boss raises its shield, it is time for Lust, as the mob will take guaranteed critical strikes during this phase. I've tried to cover all 8 routes as comprehensively as possible without turning this into a 2-hour-long video. If there's any core points that I missed, or if you have any questions about alternative routes, drop them in the comments. Either myself or another player may be able to help you out. Hopefully this helps you on your final few weeks of the season to tick off the rewards that you want from Mythic Plus. A huge thank you to my channel supporters, The Joy of Checks, Tobias, Yalem, Is This Real, Obold the Orc, and Willie at the highest tier, as well as everyone else appearing on the end screen. If you'd like to support the channel or are looking for direct coaching support from me, you can find all of the links below at the top of the description. Thank you for hanging out all the way until the end. Good luck on your final push. Until next time, take care.